Hello, and welcome to another episode of Balanced Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. After years of corporate job pressure, followed by a fast paced aerospace startup, poor health finally caught up with Dana Hemmingsen, both physically and mentally. As he looks back, Dana now understands that his health didn't have to go in that direction. There were physical and mental signs along the way, but like many of us, he just didn't know how to recognize them. It took a couple of years for Dana to recover, which led to a career shift and dedicating himself to helping others. Based on his life experience, coupled with his health work over the past 12 years, Dana has further fine tuned his practice and approach. His signature 10-week program, which he named the Belly Fat Reset, focuses on excessive insulin, where he now employs a CGM, aka a continuous glucose monitor, to encourage healthy client eating habits and behavioral shifts. Dana's mission is to help others enhance their physical and mental well being so they can lead fulfilled and vital lives. Dana has been married for 46 years. Wow. He has three children and has five grandchildren. You can learn more about Dana at www.insighthealth.zone. Dana Hemmingsen. Dana Hemmingsen, it's such an honor to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Yeah, it's awesome to be here, Casey. As we were talking earlier, I just freaking love your work. I think you do an awesome job. So thanks for the opportunity.
Well, thank you so very much. It's so honored to host you, and I apologize for stumbling through your introduction. I
No,
do that
no
from time to time.
worries. No worries. I think it makes it more real. So
That's our story. We're sticking to it. We're gonna say
yeah.
that's the thing. That's great. No, that's awesome. We are here primarily today to talk about some of your recent health changes. It's kind of cool that you stumbled upon some of these things more recently, and you and I were talking offline a little bit about how it's not that you don't appreciate the changes, is it? You almost like kind of settle into a new lifestyle, and you almost forget about those little niggling things that you had to deal with for so many years, and they just kind of like magically go away, and you almost like forget, like, oh yeah, like my shoulder always used to hurt, or my joints always used to hurt, or I had terrible sleep or anxiety or whatever. It's really amazing when you don't take it for granted. You just get used to the new lifestyle.
Absolutely. And your audience, I mean, they've listened to a bunch of people regarding the carnivore diet, and my approach to this was more of a really a clinical assessment. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mentioned that yesterday before getting online with you today. I'm just kind of accepting of how I feel, you know, and I'm already transitioning away from, which we'll talk about, from both the physical and the mental challenges that I was experiencing. And really, during the pandemic, I just went off the deep. I was just becoming a terrible role model for my clients. And the re-addiction to starchy carbs and sugars, like, oh my goodness, it just went crazy. I mean, weight gain, but just the physical and the mental side of that. So yeah, I am accepting, but I am not forgetting. And yesterday, before getting online with you, was kind of reminding me to reflect back on, wow, this is really cool, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We definitely need to keep that in mind, and reflect on our journeys and know that we still have places we want to go, but also that we come so far with all of these different changes. It's so ironic that to be able to get to that space, you have to really reject everything you've learned in your career and do something that is quite the opposite. And we are going to be talking about data, so it is important to point out we're going to be talking about some things that are subjective and some things that are objective. And so for the listener, this is pretty obvious, but just to point out, subjective is more like how you're feeling. It could be an opinion, it could be a scale of like 1 to 10, where objective things are facts, they're data. So I weigh 185 pounds. That's just a fact. That's just what it is. Being objective, you can't really argue with it. Same as saying like University of Utah football is better than BYU. That's objective science. Like everybody knows that. That's been decided up and down. We can't really argue about that. Those are objective things. I just wanted to point that out in the beginning.
Perfect analogy, and
Yeah.
also just a perfect segue as well.
Just lost all of our listeners in the valley down south of me, down by Provo. But anyway, before we jump into the data, you do have a very interesting story, which I would love to hear. Your career was not in health and fitness. So tell us about kind of your life, what you got into as far as your primary career, and how eventually that shifted over to health and fitness.
Yeah, so I started off in corporate America, working for a large company, and I was there for about 14 years. I'll just say it was very, I was negotiating, I was in purchasing and contracts, and it's just was very aggressive back in those days. It didn't really fit my demeanor, so that's not good. And then because it wasn't a good fit, it's great training looking back, especially looking at things as a system and root cause, which sucked me in on the other side and on the health side. I left and eventually hooked up with my brother-in-law's company, aerospace startup, and I'll just fast pace through that. So that was a couple of years. We went from beans and rice to, pretty successful. And we were selling to a large system, an overwing heater system for the MD-80 aircraft, which was American Airlines was the largest carrier. But we were a small company. We outsourced everything. I was the only non-technical person. I was brought in more from the manufacturing side and getting that, and just the pace of it. Anyway, it just pretty much killed me physically and mentally. And so after that, I was really forced to take a sabbatical. I did that. I started coaching high school football. Um, and as part of that, and then that kind of got me into looking at the young athletes and going, okay, because I've always trained, I started doing resistance training, which I really started with like you back when I was probably in my early teens. So I started training and I started working with some higher end athletes, some long distance runners. And then eventually I got sucked into working with everyday people, and which was great. Got my NASM certification like you, performance enhancement specialist, also functional movement specialist, started training people. Eventually I partnered and had a small boutique gym. And we were doing really functional training. So, we're kettlebells, dumbbells, that kind of thing. But as I mentioned to you before we got online, you develop these bonds, these relationships with people. And, when they come in, you ask them like, well, how are you doing? And you know what? Like half of them were still challenged. Yeah, they were getting stronger. They were moving better. But, they had maybe some headaches or some joint pains or some stomach issues, high blood pressure, still having issues, right? So back to my business side, looking at things as a system and looking at root cause, I'm like, okay, well, what's going on here? I mean, I just couldn't ignore it. And that really sucked me in because I started looking at nutrition. Then I became a FDN practitioner, which stands for Functional Diagnostic Nutrition Practitioner, which was a great program. It was a mentored program. And that got me deep into functional labs. So a lot of experience that I got from that and then doing the work. So I transitioned into the last really 6 to 8 years, I guess, really doing that kind of more health work, working with people with all different types of issues, not just weight, certainly, but again, blood pressure, different issues. But so my background really, I've done extensive hormone testing. I've done extensive gut testing, microbiome testing, GI map, BiomeFX, doing work with people doing that. One of the labs that really spoke to me, and I know you're going to get this in your listeners too, is I dove into organic acids testing, which is kind of, looking at metabolites. And so you're looking at urine, but you're looking at how your body's working basically. And you're looking at the Krebs cycle. We don't have to get into that, but basically just to summarize, it's like, how are nutrients being utilized by your body, or maybe where the deficiencies are? And so you're just looking at, from fatty acids, fatty lipids to amino acids to vitamins and minerals. It's not, it's just looking at just basic nutrients that your body needs to function. That got me into looking at things in terms of metabolic function or metabolic dysfunction. And then that's where my head went, because, and it ultimately even led me into the carnivore diet, because for me now, when we're talking about health, we're really talking about metabolic function. And that means how cellular function. So how your body's receiving these nutrients, how it's not receiving it, or how lifestyle factors in terms of stress or sleep may be impacting those. And we don't have to get deep into that. But that organic acids testing, that really kind of sparked me. So ultimately, it led me to really where I am today with my belly fat reset program. It's not a plug. but I do want to talk about it because, and get a shout out to Dr. Benjamin Dickman, because I think when we look at people's health these days, we have obesity pushing almost half the population. And that means that there are also insulin resistance. And when you look at insulin resistance and the complications metabolically, I mean, just about every health issue can be attributed to that. So for me, I started doing upfront lab work with my clients before I started using the CGM, continuous glucose monitor. And I wanted to look at that because I wanted to get a picture of and be able to share that with my client. Like, hey, let's give them some data. Like, oh, this isn't looking so good, right? You have some challenges to support the lifestyle work because you got to do the lifestyle work. I use an approach called authentic eating, which is it's a low carb, real food based approach for most people. I'd like to do the carnivore diet, which is everybody almost, but a lot of people just aren't ready for that yet. But when we look at insulin and we can monitor that, then that led me into using the CGM. And the reason for that is, we can look at glucose levels that are going to correlate to eventually to insulin response or over response and maybe insulin resistance. And the tagline for Belly Fat Reset is, reset your waist, reset your health. And over the years, my practice and my work has really focused on messaging around health complaints, health conditions. And over the last year, people around me are like, Dana, you got to niche down, man. You got to really hit people where they're at, throw a little salt in the wound, as they say. And that's what led me to Belly Fat Reset. And so when we look at where people are today and we look at reset your waist, even, there's a lot going into that. It's not just about obesity, it's about that gut in terms of visceral fat. And that's something I really want to emphasize too when we start getting into some of the numbers, because I think when you look at the carnivore diet, maybe segueing into this a little bit, I think, for me, the implications of reducing visceral fat has lifelong implications in terms of positive health outcomes. So I'll roll through that pretty fast. You're so good at what you do. I'll let you draw out anything else you want from me, Casey, or that
No,
maybe
that's
I didn't hit on or that I overstated.
That's great. No, it's such a cool journey. Like we talked about earlier, it's fun to look back and see all the little steps that led us to where we are today. You mentioned Ben Bickman. What a wonderful person. I actually just reached out to him to see if he would want to come on for the second time on this show, which now he's not going to because I've already trashed BYU in this episode. So that's out now, unfortunately. What an amazing man he is, and his research into insulin and how, his book, Why We Get Sick, how that's impacted so many lives of people out there. He's got such a wonderful way of taking a very complex subject and making it really simple to understand. We love Ben Bickman around here. I do want to ask, when you were first starting to get into nutrition, you were getting that certification, were they promoting any particular type of diet? Was it in the low carbohydrate space? Was it like a whole foods diet? Was it more like a Mediterranean style? Like, did they have one that they
Oh,
were more trending towards?
yeah. So see, you're so good at what you do. So that's a great question. And at the time, Sison and the paleo diet was really coming into vogue. And that was kind of, that whole CrossFit thing was really going, which, is neither here nor there. I kind of look at it as functional training, but it really was around the paleo diet, which for me is still pretty cool, and there's so many really positive things around it. So I'm not really a labeling kind of guy. I mean, I like to talk about the carnivore diet. I like to talk about different diets, but I think as you've really started to emphasize too, I think it is, look, there's some things we don't want to do, okay, like processed foods and all that kind of stuff. But everybody individually, metabolically, can handle things differently. Like for me, my autoimmune issues and gut issues, like the plant stuff isn't too cool,
Yeah.
and we don't have to talk about oxalates and all that kind of stuff. But I think there are a lot of people that are probably have those types of issues, and I've done enough gut work. So, but to answer your question, it was really that really kind of sucked me in was really the paleo diet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mentioned Sisson. That's a really good example. It's almost like a gateway kind of a thing. Like if you're on
Yeah.
paleo, I'm gonna be pretty happy because I kind of know in the back of my mind, like for however long you want to hang out in the paleo space, eventually you're gonna go lower carb. Eventually you're gonna try keto. Eventually you're gonna try carnivore, which Mark Sisson has done himself. He's now 70 years old and carnivore and is thriving and kicking ass, even though he's writing so much in 2016 about paleo, in 2018 more about keto. Now he's doing the carnivore thing as well. And it's almost like if that gets you on the path, eventually I know you're probably going to get in that realm and start feeling really, really good. So that's great. How eventually did you even hear about a carnivore diet?
I don't really know, and I knew you were going to ask me that. But I think just to summarize, living in the space that we do as health coaches, health practitioners, I'm just always listening to podcasts, and whether it's you, Ben Bickman, or whoever, you know, Dr. Baker, Dr. Berry, Chafee, everybody on that side of it, but also I listen to I forget her name, but I really love her and she's the Levels founder. You probably know her name. Um, but just listening to people, and then I started listening to. I think what really got me going were just the probably now they're getting into the certainly hundreds, but maybe thousands of people's personal experiences with the carnivore diet. And it just became um I just couldn't ignore it because these were not, I don't even want to say they're anecdotal, because look, you can get into, is it a a proper study or what have you, but give me 100 people that line up that are being interviewed by somebody that's a professional that has credentials, and they're describing what the benefits and their outcome are. It had a huge impact on me. So just I would say just a lot of inputs coming in that I just couldn't ignore. And then for me, I started looking at some different elements, maybe a little more deeply in terms of like, for example, cholesterol ratios and things like that we'll get into. That I'm going, okay, that sounds something like I want to experience personally.
Yeah. The anecdotes, there's just too many now. There's too many. There's too many people that are
Yeah.
describing exactly the same thing to where it's like expected results. If somebody starts carnivore, I know what they're going to tell me if they stay on it for 30 days. And it's so consistent every single time. It's almost like a reverse causality where you can explain it based on so much anecdote out there. And so for you, when you first started carnivore, what do you remember still kind of dealing with? Obviously, you had kind of pushed into paleo and probably much lower carbohydrate than what you were doing before. But what were you still dealing with when you started carnivore that ended up kind of resolving itself?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I think from my experience, I've dove in too quick
Hmm.
and I underestimated my re-addiction that I mentioned to to sugar and carbohydrates. So I went in way too fast,
Hmm.
and the withdrawal was pretty humbling and reinforcing of the power of glucose addiction.
Yeah.
I mean, it was unbelievable. But I made it through, and because of my experience, because I've worked with clients, typically even with my approach, authentic eating, with belly fat reset, I have to take in mind how somebody might withdraw. I get a feeling for what their intake is, and then I can work it through that in terms of the number of days. Um, so I jumped in too fast. So that was one element. The other element for me, because of my history with autoimmune, I went grass fed, grass finished, salt, and water. And I haven't given up coffee. It's the last Sebastian of giving up. I don't know that I will. I still just really enjoy it. I don't think it's had a big impact to me in terms of my autoimmune issues. Um, I would say I just kind of dove in, and once I got through that, I went through maybe a period. I'll use a real technical term where I felt loopy when I knew I was transitioning metabolically at a much deeper level from not really switching, maybe necessarily from glucose to ketones, but just my body adapting and really getting into that fat burning mode. And it was kind of weird because it wasn't like all day or whatever. I might have a couple of hours. I wasn't dizzy. I just kind of felt kind of loopy. And and at the time though, I was thinking, well, are my electrolytes down? Salt, and I'm getting into all of that. But I do think it was just a transitioning. And then later on, the transitioning, the only thing I experienced was definitely some of that weird, kind of significant cramping you might get, the calf or whatever. Even in the abdomen, you're getting up, you might bend a little bit and you recruit that muscle fiber, and it just goes off like pretty significant. And so I played around with that. I'm like, well, maybe not enough magnesium, not enough potassium. I just think it's partly my body was transitioning. And even in the last, so I'm on 6 months now, even in the last few weeks at the most, I think my body has settled in a little bit in. And I think if I look back, it probably was more around salt than it was magnesium or potassium. And I still am doing electrolytes. That's probably, the only supplement that I really do. But I kind of feel like the salt and the cramping thing settled out a little bit.
Good.
So in retrospect, it's a great learning experience that I'm doing it, because probably I would just kind of get people a little bit more on the salt thing,
Yeah.
the Soleil water and, dilution and getting that whole going, and just kind of do that every day, and not just very moderate amounts. But other than that, I mean, once I got through the loopy part, which maybe that lasted 2 weeks, maybe a week, I don't recall now. I probably should have recorded it, but so I didn't really do a really nice documentary on my experience. But that's probably about it. Everything else has been like just so positive, off the chart. Those things that I'm
Wow.
talking about don't even really factor in.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, it's cool that you documented what you did. Maybe it wasn't everything, but I've got here all of the blood work that you've done. You did a first panel on March the 5th, 2023, and your second one on July the 3rd, 2023. So we've got all of these numbers that we can go over. I do have to point this out. I pointed this out to you via email. Your height has not changed. Your height is still 71 inches. So before anybody gets too excited about the carnivore diet, it's not a cure-all. It's not going to turn you into a power forward in the NBA, unfortunately. So I'm sorry for that. No
That
change
was so
there.
funny. I do remember when you said that. I have cracked up about that a couple of times.
It's just this diet. Like you think it would be amazing, and it just sucks. Like it's unbelievable. So, okay. So would you like to just kind of start at the top? We can talk about the top number. I
Sure.
would also
Yeah.
love to discuss, your understanding of these numbers that we're talking about. What is it? What does this do in the body? Where would we like to see this? Is this very important? Is this less important? Just any commentary that you have on some of
Yeah.
these numbers, I think would be fantastic. And the one at the very top, the top two ones, I think we can talk about kind of together is insulin and hemoglobin A1C. So yeah, let's deep dive into those numbers, and I'd love to hear your input on what they are and why they're important.
Well, first off, if you had Benjamin Bickman on, he could talk for more than 2 hours about those two markers.
Absolutely.
So, in fact, if right now, if you had to pick one health marker, and this was through LabCorp. This was a blood draw, fasted blood draw. I would say it's insulin and fasted
Insulin.
insulin.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, when we look at, and this is where Dr. Bickman really got me into it, when you look at the health implications and where everybody's at, I think, look, the bottom line for people, and that's one of the reasons I kind of rebranded the work that I do into the belly fat reset. Most people are interested in aesthetics. I mean, it's still that. It's about their waist. It's about their weight. The health benefits for most people, unless they're really a type 2 diabetic or something, it's kind of a sideline. It's a byproduct, which is cool. However, I can get people to do the work. But pretty much, if your insulin is under an established level and you're not insulin resistant, it's like impossible to get fat.
Yeah.
So when you have that excess insulin, and certainly if you're insulin resistant, where your cells are not receiving the insulin as much, and your body's going to pancreas is going to start spitting out more of that, is you're going to start pushing glucose into fat cells, and that's not cool health wise, and certainly in terms of aesthetics. And I would say one of the big ones with insulin for me related to that is just highly inflammatory. So if you look at the implications of having excess insulin floating around your bloodstream too long, you think like related to inflammation. And you start thinking about blood pressure, you start thinking about arteriosclerosis, plaquing, and all of those types of things. So for me, insulin, impacts both aesthetics and health in just a huge, huge way. It should this marker should be, if people aren't doing this, I don't want to use the word demand, but they should assertively request this through their physician. Yeah,
Yeah.
fasted insulin level. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the implications on that are so huge. And we see your numbers going from 9.3 to 6.2 as far as the insulin goes. And then what happened with your A1C?
Well, the A1C, that's why, I went into this initially as a 90-day assessment in terms of the carnivore diet. But I wanted to add another 30 days because, as you know, and probably many of your listeners, an A1C is an average blood sugar reading, well, maybe 2 to 3 months. Might pick up the last couple of weeks a little bit more. And with the carnivore diet, it's interesting because we're just seeing that marker is not changing that much. It's kind of a deep topic, so mine just remained at 5.4 across the, throughout this 4-month period. And it's probably more than theory, with the carnivore diet. They're saying your red blood cells are living a little bit longer, maybe even more robust. They're healthy. So it's hanging on. It's showing that glucose, it's stuck to them a little bit. So it's throwing off. To be honest with you, I mentioned this to Dr. Sean Baker when I chatted with him, that I'm not even sure it's a viable marker anymore if somebody's on
Yeah,
the carnivore diet. So I kind of look at it as a flyer out there. But if somebody is definitely not doing a carnivore diet, this would be a marker they definitely would want to
sure.
check. And just looking at, it's obviously related to insulin. But I think one of the things that Ben Bickman really got me thinking about too is that this idea of going in and for people that maybe are in that realm of they need to have the glucose checked, you can check your glucose. And if your pancreas is still producing enough insulin, and you're not looking at the insulin, your blood glucose could still remain below that diabetic or even
That's right.
pre-diabetic level, but you could go on for years with insulin sensitivity and all that inflammation and everything else that's going on. That to me, that understanding that was absolutely remarkable when it comes to
Yeah.
metabolic health. And I know there are a lot of physicians that don't understand that
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
certainly aren't considering it for various reasons. We don't have to get into that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And you're right. Ben Bickman does such a great job explaining that like it doesn't matter if your glucose is flatlined, as long as your insulin is going up, you're going to have problems. It's just you're not going to be able to detect them because you're looking at the wrong number. You're looking at the glucose. Glucose will be controlled even if it takes a lot more insulin, but that's still going to lead to problems. We could diagnose type 2 diabetes so much earlier and more effectively if we were looking at the insulin number, not the glucose number. So I'm really glad you pointed that out. I tend to agree with you as far as A1C. There's just some contextual things when you eat in this way that throws the kind of standard narrative out the window. Like vitamin C is a good one. Like I literally have not
Yeah.
had any considerable amount of vitamin C in like 4.5 years, and I don't have scurvy. And
Right.
people ask
Yeah.
me about certain markers, and I'll say that, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, that is a little bit weird." And it just if you're eating a lot of carbohydrates, you need a lot of vitamin C, but that those rules change if you're eating a carnivore diet. So I tend to agree with you. I don't put as much emphasis on that A1C numbers I used to, although I think you made a really great point, which is like population wise, eating the standard diet.
Yeah.
If your A1C is 12, it's almost like saying your BMI is 40. Like I can take a pretty good guess that something is not going that well, if that makes sense. It doesn't tell you, the body fat percentage or the muscle mass, but it's still directionally like, okay, something's up. So anyway,
Yeah.
so the
I
thing
agree with all that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think you explained it really well. Let's go down to C-reactive protein, which has to do with inflammation. So show us where you were measuring in March and how that changed into July.
Yeah, so let me preface that. So I have a long history of autoimmune issues, which, I know from the gut work I did, like I had Giardia, which I discovered, and some other issues, probably some gluten things. So, we don't have to get into this, but I think it is important, and why it's important to my assessment here. If you look at me as a client, um, is the intestinal permeability and the leaky gut aspect of that, and that relates to my history. And that gut work was pretty woo woo even 6 to 8 years ago. Now, leaky gut is it's not woo woo at all. It's pretty well science established. And so C-reactive protein being a marker of, let's say, systemic inflammation, so it's not going to tell you that you have a wound on your knee necessarily or anything like that acute, but and it's not going to tell you exactly where the inflammation is coming from. But my experience in looking at people, I think for many people, I think if they have a high C-reactive protein, um, I do think it's related to the gut. And so that's one element. For me, my marker went, so for the most part, when you look at optimal ranges, I think less than one uh, would be a good healthy marker. And we don't have to get into what the readings are on this, just for the general purpose, just less than one. Mine started off at 1.38. But I think if I'd have had continued with how I was eating, you know, moving out of the pandemic and just content, that would have just really increased dramatically. But it went from 1.38, which is still high, to 0.81. My guess is it's probably lower now,
Yeah,
but that's pretty phenomenal. And
it is.
and and for people that are familiar with this marker, that health practitioners, physicians, and certainly rheumatologists, to look at people that can reduce that marker that significantly over a 4-month period, pretty monumental. And we'll get into that because I think that really relates into some of the, as you described, some of the more subjective things that I was considering in this
Yeah.
assessment.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that would be an expected marker. I would expect you to say I went carnivore and my CRP dropped, which
Yeah.
again it did, and I would not be surprised with your hunch as well that it's probably even a little bit lower now. So that's fantastic. If we move down the list, we've got what looks like some of my favorite numbers to look at, which are numbers taken from a lipid profile. So we've got a ratio here of triglycerides to HDL. We see HDL cholesterol, we see LDL cholesterol. Everybody knows HDL cholesterol is called good cholesterol. LDL cholesterol is called bad cholesterol. I see triglycerides on here. Now, you're missing one that seems to be very important. Dana, why did you not list your total cholesterol?
I am so glad that you asked, Casey, because let me just put this in very scientific terms, because it's silly.
Thank you.
Okay? It's silly unless you want to sell a medication. And then it's a really effective tool.
Yep.
Okay? So that, I think that summarizes it. If you want to go into more detail for your listeners, but for me, I think it's about, there's more detail in terms of, lipids and cholesterol you want to look at. But for most people, looking at the three that we're talking about here, I think, and looking at healthy ratios. Okay, ratios, not good, bad, as maybe I sensed more than a little sarcasm there, but but your point is very, very valid, I think. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I hope that the listener will go and look up silly. It's a highly technical term. You might not be able to understand this really technical mumbo jumbo medical speak. But you're right. And I think we have to keep in mind that when we started experiencing heart attacks like 100, 200 years ago, heart attacks really weren't a thing. They were exceedingly rare. They were increasing in the 1950s. We needed to figure it out. We started to notice that there was an accumulation in people's arteries that included cholesterol and other things that turned into the thing that we blamed. We have to remember that back then, we were really new in even being able to measure cholesterol, and we didn't even know there was LDL and HDL cholesterol when we started demonizing cholesterol itself. It was just cholesterol. The learning later that there were different factions and subfractions and all that stuff, that came much, much, much later. And so in the beginning, when people said cholesterol is bad, they were talking about all cholesterol, and the lower it was, just the better, which we all know is absolute nonsense garbage and is very, very silly. The markers that are more important you've included here. So triglyceride to HDL ratio. I don't know how you feel about this marker in particular. For me, that if you don't have any other numbers on this page besides the insulin, I would say this ratio tells me pretty much everything I need to know about your metabolic health. Would you agree?
I absolutely agree with that. And again, I learned that from Benjamin Bigman, and I think that that is a really easy one for people. You just take your triglycerides divided by the HDL, and it's going to give you a number. And depending on your heritage, can impact this. Some people will say it should be less than 1.8, that ratio, or less than 2. Maybe some people might even go a little lower than that. I'm just averaging. I'm just going to say, look, a really optimal range would be less than 1.8. So mine wasn't bad, but again, I want to emphasize that I went years with eating real food and doing really, really well before the pandemic, and so that helped me in terms of my re-addiction. But I went from 1.61 during this 4-month period down to 1.09, and that's again a significant reduction. And this is really easy because for the most part, any standard lab that your physician's gonna pull in terms of your blood work, you're gonna get HDL and you're gonna get triglycerides. So you can easily adapt this ratio and get an idea. And what that really is looking at is an indication of potential insulin resistance, which is, so if your physician said, oh, we can't afford to test your fasted insulin, which is, they should be able. It's
Silly
not.
again,
It's
silly.
silly. I was going to use that, but I didn't want to overuse it. But thank you. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did. Absolutely. But this is really easy for people to be able to do, and they don't even need their physician to do it. They can just take those markers and divide them up. It's really easy, and you can come up with that. So you want it to be, let's just say, even if it's less than 2.0,
Yeah.
I think that's I completely agree with you on that ratio, and how significant it is.
I would be very happy with those numbers. And you made a good point too, that like if you can't afford more advanced blood work, maybe this is again like a gateway where you can get a lipid profile. I was doing these on clients. They were paying like $30 and it's just a little finger stick, should be
Yeah,
easily accessible and inexpensive. That can at least tell you whether you need to do additional testing. And your numbers look great. One thing that people are normally surprised by is triglycerides. So triglycerides would be like the liquid fat that's traveling around in the body. And what we notice is people that start eating more fat and eating less carbohydrates, their triglycerides actually drop, which is a little counterintuitive because you would think like if they're eating, ribeyes cooked in butter, you would imagine that the fat in the blood would actually go up, and it really doesn't. It tends to drop. And that is an
yeah,
understanding of how we actually make fat. Fat does not make you fat. It is turning carbohydrates into fat in the liver when you
in the
consume them.
liver,
That is
in the
what people
liver.
need to concern themselves
Yes,
about. Yeah.
absolutely. Sorry to interrupt you. I just got enthusiastic about what you were saying, but absolutely. And that's why we'll get down to it. But when you look at the implications of fatty liver, and when I was emphasizing talking about the carnivore diet and visceral fat, you can assume that if you've got a thick belly, okay, whether you're obese or whether you fall into that, what's called skinny fat, where you kind of don't have a lot of lean muscle, but you get that haunch that's pretty significant, you're probably going to have fatty liver. So that's a big consideration, and that is going to be correlated to those high triglycerides. So I think you summed it up pretty well there. I mean, my triglycerides went from 100, which still is not, I really, I thought it was going to be a lot worse. I really did. I was kind
Pretty
of
good.
happy with that. I was kind of happy with that number, but it went down to 84,
Yeah.
so which is no surprise. Again, when you look at all the people that are lining up with the benefits results from the carnivore diet, if they are looking at blood work, these are not surprising numbers at all.
Mhm. No, not at all. And we see that, again, quote unquote, bad cholesterol, LDL cholesterol went up 136. So already kind of borderline high to 155, which is definitely high. Most doctors would be stunned and they would want you on a statin. Does that high LDL cholesterol concern you at all?
No, not at all. In fact, where I'm at, I do think sometime eventually, if you look at my ratios to answer your question, and I have a good balance between HDL, LDL, and triglycerides, and where the LDL, at least through the historic eyes of evaluating LDL, went from 136 to 155, as you said. But I look at that as a sign of vitality.
Agreed.
Okay, and when you look at and again, your sarcasm in terms of talking about good and bad cholesterol, HDL and LDL. Look, cholesterol is essential. Like it's vital. Like you die without it, right? Now it is the ratio, absolutely. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's involved in hormone production and LDL. There's a lot of information starting to maybe surface a little bit more too and support because it has a lot to do with supporting our body's response to inflammation. And I
Absolutely.
touch on that. Don't ask me a lot of questions about it. I haven't researched that. I haven't personally studied that aspect, but I have seen enough study headlines to know that I think there are implications around that. So I am totally cool with my ratios and where my LDL cholesterol's at, especially with my history of autoimmune issues, and I
Yeah.
think that there's starting to be some information and studies starting to come out in terms of people with low LDL are not doing that well in terms of
Yeah.
longevity and inflammation. So
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's some really cool research out with people that have familial hypercholesterolemia, which means they're born with a genetic disease where their cholesterol is really, really high. And up until they've got a higher mortality rate until they turn about 40, and then they
yeah,
reach a crossover point. So if you have this condition, a really unfortunate condition, kids die of heart attacks at like age 6. It's really tragic. But again, if you
yeah,
make it to a certain disease, they actually survive much better than the general population, and they're like disproportionately protected from other diseases that people die from, like cancer, hypertension, dementia. And so it's interesting that genetic condition in the beginning of your life isn't great, but if you survive past a certain point, you're even more protected. And I think there's great evidence that LDL cholesterol in particular is really good for things like immunity. You mentioned inflammation. I would be really happy with that number. You already mentioned the fatty liver, so we see the ALT number. So that went from 35 to 26, which is right in range. That's phenomenal.
yeah, totally cool
I
with that. Yep, yep,
yeah, very much agree with what we've talked about already with visceral fat. If you are storing fat inside the middle part of the body, if you have hard fat, not the jiggly fat, but the hard, firm fat in and around
yes.
your belly, that is your body depositing fat where it really shouldn't go, and you would really rather not have that happen.
That's a great description, Casey. Seriously, the way you how simply you broke that down to everybody can relate to that. So agree.
Yeah, we go to your body metrics, and the first one we come up to is waist to height ratio and your waist. Here we go. If you can't do any of this, if you are so poor that you've got none of this, that's my next most important thing is what is your waist circumference? Go grab a piece of string, measure your waist circumference. That again is another proxy that tells me whether you're metabolically healthy or not, and we can make inferences about where we think the other numbers might be. But let's talk about waist to height, your waist, and your overall weight.
Yeah, so the my waist height ratio went from 0.58, which is high. So optimally, maybe 0.43 to 0.52, and a drop to 0.52. And yeah, we're going to talk about my waist, and let's just jump right in because, and this really was less than the 4 months. Again, I went into this assessment in really 90 days, but my waist went from 41 to 36, and it's actually less than that now. Think about it in that short of time frame. And I'm not like I'm not watching, again, calories are just also a silly thing to do, but for most people, vast majority of people. But I'm full, I'm satiated, I feel nourished. But again, when you look at that waist reduction in terms of inches, 41 to 36, to be honest with you, my waist and my weight from an anesthetic perspective had more impact to me personally, psychologically, than I would care to admit.
Man,
And I would just use the word pride, and I've never, again, looking at things, but when it impacted me personally, it just feels really friggin' good. And then when you think about the health implications, because that and we'll get into my weight, but that's visceral fat, and let's just jump down to my weight because we don't need to talk about my height, which you mentioned, because that's remained static. No surprise there.
sure.
My That's so funny. My went from 211 pounds to 181. I think I'm like 178, 170. I really have, I don't really weigh, but let's just say 30 pounds. And if you want to just take 4 months, again, satiated, full, nourished, not craving, and then you get that kind of response, right? So, I mean, this is friggin' off the chart. I mean, those results, those things just absolutely. I'll speak from a client, a personal perspective, not a health practitioner. Absolutely blew me away.
Yeah,
Blew me away. You
yeah,
know, and the fact that I can stay satiated. And the big thing is, I won't talk about this too much because I do resistance training. I don't do it crazily. I know what I'm doing, so I can really dial it in. I mean, my resistance training is like 20 minutes. But but the thing about this is, so I'm 65, okay, and I have, because of years of accumulated, maybe doing resistance training, and not off the chart, right? I mean, I went through the bro days early on and some semi bodybuilding and carb loading and all that. That was a long time ago. But the big thing I want to emphasize here is I have not lost any lean muscle. Okay. And I, for a lot of listeners that are following people on, out there in the space. But I want to emphasize that because that is huge. And especially when I see, we don't have to get into the emphasis more to, plant-based diets, that aren't going to have enough protein, amino acids to help build that lean muscle. But to maintain your lean muscle at 60, look, when you start to get over 50, man, the last thing you want to do is lose lean muscle.
that's
And
right.
not only just in terms of, I'm talking about aesthetics, I'm talking about health. And also, when you look at insulin and you look at lean muscle and implications for being supportive of healthy glucose levels, it's a big deal. So, again, I don't lose any lean muscle.
Yeah,
In fact, I have gained.
yeah,
I have measured, I'm not measuring and doing all that stuff, but I can just tell, you
yeah,
look in the mirror, and I'm not
yep,
looking in the mirror and
yep,
flexing or anything like that, but just, getting out of the shower, glancing, kind of a thing. I have maintained lean muscle.
yep. Okay, so you and I share many of the same kind of certifications. We've gone through some of the same things. These are nationally accredited, very well respected, with lots of different education and manuals. And according to them, impossible. What you did is impossible. You cannot do that. You can't lose the maximum recommended amount of weight to lose in 1 week, which you lost at the rate of about 2 pounds per week. You would lose fat, but you would also lose lean mass. You'd lose muscle tissue. You'd lose water. It's impossible. You can't do that. And why is it that I see it all the time? You can absolutely maintain and grow muscle and lose fat at really high rates and keep that up for a long time. It's
So
amazing.
so a bit of sarcasm. So yeah, I weigh my food, before every meal, and I'm making sure I'm at about 1,200 calories.
Yeah, exactly. Healthy
Not,
snacks.
not. So yeah, so the point about that is that you're absolutely right, and it's phenomenal, and again, I'm not counting calories. I mean, if I'm hungry, I'm going to eat more. I mean, tomorrow night's Friday. I usually celebrate with a pound and a half grass-fed ribeye, and that's going to happen. You know, yeah, it's not. We're not watching calories. You're just friggin' nourishing your body. You
Yeah,
know.
totally different paradigm. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely a different paradigm. Yeah.
That's amazing. So again, we're looking at the next marker down that I see is blood pressure. That takes a drop, 144 to 86 to 123 over 80. Very healthy blood pressure. You would think, again, increase in saturated fat, increase in salt would make that go up, went down. See that all the time. That's amazing. And then we have health complaints and diet discoveries. And now we're on a scale of 1 to 5. So now we're in objective land. This is going to be fun. So let's talk about all of these different things that you were kind of experiencing, kind of day to day. And did you rank these on that day? Like, did you look at some of those conditions and say this was on March the 5th of 2023? This is how you felt on that day, or was it more like retrospective, thinking back on it after having felt really good?
No, it was on that day. Yeah,
Cool.
I wanted to go in this. Yeah, absolutely. So on a 1 to 5, 5 being terrible, is how I rank these. And the first one, which is psoriasis. So, you know, there's involved plaquing and also psoriatic arthritis. Um, so my experience with that, and I didn't have a lot of psoriatic plaquing as people might understand it, but there were certainly skin implications because for over 15 years, I've been taking a biological drug, anti-inflammatory drug. And I'll just mention it, Enbrel.
Embro,
Okay,
yeah, I see it down there.
over 15 years. Okay, now did it help? Yeah, because I didn't know about this, but a couple of elements there. So my complaints regarding psoriasis went from, if I rated it a 5, which is pretty terrible, went down to a 1. Okay,
Amazing.
and the point I want to mention there is, after 15 years of a weekly injection of this biological agent that has, like, if you read the, you know, if you see the commercials and the all the disclaimers at the end, like, it's not good, right? Like, you know, it's not good at all. I have weaned off. Okay, like, if anybody has any understanding of autoimmunity and something that has gone on for a number of years, and certainly if it's developed into things like, you know, Hashimoto's, which, you know, your body starts attacking itself in some form or another. For me, it was psoriasis, psoriatic arthritis. To be able to use whatever term you want to call, I won't use the word cure. I'll use the word dampen. I'll use the word remission if that's required. But to be able to do this, that is off the chart. Okay. Like, people are not walking out of their rheumatologist's office and getting these results.
That's right.
And they're getting prescribed medications to
Yep.
mitigate these symptoms, which is, you know, some people need that. Don't get me wrong. I did, and I didn't know any better. But I feel
Yep.
like I had to sign a contract with the devil, which I did back then, in terms of the disclaimer and looking at the significance of potential long-term side effects. I'm weaned off. Oh,
Amazing.
done. Yeah, and it's not inexpensive at all. So that's huge. You want me to roll into these other ones, Casey?
Yeah, absolutely. Fatigue, negative mood, body stiffness, discomfort, like all of these huge drops.
Yeah, so fatigue went from 4 to 1. That's easy. And these were health complaints that I was aware of going in, which is an important point because the
Yeah,
discoveries are
that's
different. The
yeah,
discoveries
totally.
are different, right? So my fatigue, you know, just, you know, radically improved. My negative mood, which you know, I definitely had some negative mood, and you know, that little guy on your shoulder talking to you sometimes and saying all that crazy stuff. And then also just general body stiffness. You know, not bad. I'm still training. You know, I do brisk walks. I mean, for 65, you know, pretty good, probably from the years of the work that I've done. And but that went from a 4 to a 1 as well. And I think when I look at, if you think about the psoriasis and the body stiffness and all of these issues, really, it gets back to that C-reactive protein blood marker. and that
Yep.
reduction in systemic inflammation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, those were off the chart. I think the biggest thing for me that was, I mean, it was more than interesting, but were these discoveries of things that I just was not aware of. And I would say if I had to put most of it in a category, it would be on the mental fitness, the mental health side. In my work with clients that I do now, whatever, what I always look at, you know, the people that have metabolic dysfunction, right? Their bodies aren't working, they have inflammation, whatever. Um, the mental health part, whether it's cognition, maybe some elements of anxiety, maybe even going depression. I mean, whatever it is, mental clarity, they're not aware of it.
That's right.
They're not aware of it because it's insidious and it just creeps up on people.
Yep.
And unless you have a switch, which I actually have a switch on my website, a little graphic for that. Unless you could take a switch and go, hey, feel this. This is how you should feel, right? Experience that for a day. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to turn this switch off. They'd have no idea, right?
Yeah.
So for me, this like turned the switch on. I mean, when I look at like ruminating thoughts, I didn't realize like I was. I mean, another technical term, funky, along with silly. But it was not good. And I went from a 4 to a 1. Now, these numbers that I put on here were kind of post in terms of how bad they were because I wasn't aware of them. So I had to kind of go back
Yeah.
and go, okay, this is where they were.
Yeah.
The state of constant uneasiness went from a 4 to 1. These have improved, actually. I would say both of these are a 0 now.
Wow.
No,
It's
I still
incredible.
think I still think about things. I still worry about things. That's natural. You got to go
Yeah.
through however your brain's working to deal with these things. The other one, which is a really big deal, and this sounds like one of those things like when somebody talks about it, like it's too good to be true or whatever. So I was having these tension headaches, and the work that we do, looking at musculoskeletal issues, I kind of attributed to I always had these thick traps. I had my collarbone severed because of a surgery, so compensation, tension. I thought it was going over my neck, over up top of my head, into my forehead. I would say once a week, I was getting a headache from that I thought was tension. I would get out these massager elements and gouging me into my traps to loosen it up on my neck, and it would help a little bit, right? And every couple of weeks, to the point of, I got to take some ibuprofen. This is kind of messing up my day, right? And that didn't even really help that much. And this is one that I like. I was sitting with my wife, who absolutely I got to give a shout out. She has been so supportive about the carnivore diet, and she goes gathering and grab some grass fed steaks for me at places. So
Beautiful.
yeah, I'm going to mention her, Yvonne. She's phenomenal. Um, but anyway, these tension headaches, they're gone. They gone. I was like, oh man, they're gone. They're gone. It's gone. So I have since uh, you know, I don't know, maybe I was halfway through this. I have not experienced one.
Amazing.
And this went on for, I don't know, more than 6 years.
Yeah. That's amazing.
So, I mentioned this on Dr. Baker's the interview. I think it has to do, you can get back to the inflammatory marker, whatever. I think somehow these healthy saturated fats and maybe the peptides, these little amino acids and different components, are getting out there and reaching to our extremities in terms of dealing with inflammation. I don't know. That's total speculation on my part. And probably nobody knows this right now. But all I know is really,
Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. This last column, your diet discoveries with everything mental that you're describing. Again, we went over this ruminating thoughts, constant uneasiness, mental clarity. This is why I am planning on being carnivore for a very, very long time because when I go
me too.
off, I re experience all of those things and that spinning voice of all the things that will never happen to you in anxiety. When that goes away, you are not willing to bring that back into your life for any price. No donut really tastes that good. No pie is really that good. Like it is worth it
Abs-
to eat steak and eggs and be happy and satiated and have all these numbers correct themselves.
sometimes when you say things, Casey, I get so enthusiastic. I just want to jump in and rumble with your conversation.
Please, please, absolutely.
But you know what? I completely agree. And I didn't mention this, but part of my sabbatical after my corporate and aerospace startup, I mean, I dealt with some significant depression, more on that side. And I think sometimes when people experience that, I'm not sure it ever kind of goes away, so to speak. So not that I was depressed during this period. I'm not saying that, but I do think those ruminating thoughts, the constant uneasiness, that there's some deep seatedness down there. And where I'm getting at, when you have been on that side of the equation of, mentally just feeling like crap, it's like, man, you do not want to go back. And so now it's even to a different point. It's like my mental cognition, I mean, I feel like I have literally gone back in time. I feel like I'm on a slight, like almost a dosage of anabolic steroids. I know that sounds really kind of out there, but I feel like I have never thought more clearly and focused more clearly than I have. I don't even years. Let's just say that. So I think that kind of sums it up in terms of mental clarity. I mean, the improvement is just significant. And as you said too, it really, I mean, I'm 6 months in and I am not even thinking about anything. I mean, I'm just kind of doing my thing and eating. I mean, I am doing some, let's say, conventionally raised beef right now. I was eating lamb, which was grass-fed New Zealand stuff, and I've done that. That's a great value, by the way, because a lot of people don't like lamb, so you can get real healthy stuff pretty inexpensively. But when I look at it, I haven't noticed any implications in my autoimmune activity related to maybe the composition of commercially raised beef versus grass fed, grass finished. I think the animals help us out. I think they help us out to a certain extent. I do think they clean some things out, through their process of metabolizing. But so I'm just kind of mixing in a little bit. Like I have a source for ground beef that's grass fed, grass finished up in our area, which is up in the Sonoma, kind of way north Bay Area. And it's a phenomenal. They delivered to the house. And so it's a great source. So I'm kind of mixing it in now. And I also do some water encased. I do sardines and I do mackerel. In fact, I'm going to have that for lunch today. It's very inexpensive. It's got, I mean, if you look at like the omega-3 healthy fats, that it comes with, it's like, and because it's so reasonable, I mean, I might have 4 tins at lunch. I
Nice.
might have 2 sardines and 4 mackerels and go
Nice.
for it.
Great.
So yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. And what a cool journey. And I agree with you that, if you can have a source of grass-fed, organic, whatever, and you support that and your farmer, that's awesome. But I also just before this interview went to the clearance section of the meat department in my local supermarket and bought what they had on sale. I'm going to have burger patties tonight because they were on sale. They were going to go bad. I don't believe there's much of a difference ethically between those two things. And so you don't make a carnivore diet prohibitive, cost wise. If you can just deal with whatever meat you have, find the meat that you enjoy. Love that you're doing the sardines and mackerel as well. Super inexpensive and a great way to get those nutrients like you mentioned. I do want you to tell us about your program, the belly fat reset program. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you work with people?
Oh, that's such an awesome question. Yeah. So it's a 10-week program. I'm working one-on-one, which is what I've done. I'm only now venturing out in kind of the social space a little bit. I've been like a quail running around in the bushes making a bunch of noise. But it's a 10-week program. And really it's kind of a trick because it's 12, because the first 2 weeks there's education. And so I'm working one-on-one with clients. So it's a VIP or whatever, but it's very personalized. So I coach people up on some lifestyle implications. I have a Zoom session. These are all about 30 to 45 minutes. I have a session on authentic eating. And for people that, again, that want to think about it, they could think more paleo if they wanted to, but definitely low carb. I'm pushing low carb pretty heavy, and prioritizing protein. And then during that 2 weeks too, I'm also ordering I'm a approved practitioner for Signos, for the CGM, the continuous glucose monitor.
Cool.
So I order their prescription for that, get it shipped to their house. So it's all done virtually. So get them hooked up with that. They typically like to do a little experimenting when they first get it on, and maybe eat some pancakes with maple syrup or something. And they
Yeah,
go, oh,
totally.
wow, okay,
Wow.
okay, yeah, wow. So I try to get them kind of comfortable. So a big part of it is, I teach people how to fish. I'm not doing meal plans. I don't believe in it. I'm teaching people how to live a healthy lifestyle, and in terms of really prioritizing food. My only other requirement, I'd love to have them resistance train, but my only other requirement, aside from attending their weekly coaching sessions with me, which I'll describe, is that they get in a 30-minute brisk walk. And I tell them, look, here's my coaching advice. I don't want you to look dorky out there. Just go out your front door for 15 minutes and then turn around and come back. But get
Perfect.
those arms swinging. Like, again, you don't have to look dorky, but get those arms swinging a little bit. And I really push that a lot. There's just so many scientific elements of that, and just getting outdoors psychologically. But then I do my weekly. Every week there's a 30-minute check-in. I do an assessment. I look subjectively. I look at energy levels. I rate them on a 1 to 5. I rate their mental clarity, and I rate their focus and their mood. Sorry, their mood. And then I try to get, like, how are they doing with authentic eating, and get that. But then what I can do is pull up their CGM dashboard, right? And go, oh, maybe we're not as committed to authentic eating as we thought we were. And it's a great dashboard. Cygnus is doing an awesome job. So, so a client has to log their food, but that's awesome because it's really easy to do now. It's super easy. They can even take a photo if push comes to shove. Doesn't take maybe a minute and a half, maybe two after every meal or snack, which I'm not encouraging snacks, by the way. I'd rather have them go for 3 or 4 hours. But and so I can look at their dashboard, and we have some goals in terms of where their average glucose is. You can look at all the spikes. You can look at a week average. Quite frankly, I don't even know how I worked without this tool now. And why do I like it? Yeah, it's glucose, because I always remind people that we're not just looking at glucose. We're going back to Benjamin Bickman and that insulin, you know.
Yep. Yep. And it's so different to measure glucose one time versus seeing it continuously. That's where the value comes, is seeing it go up, seeing it go down, and having people try to make that roller coaster ride as boring as possible. Make it my kind of style of a roller coaster where it's not very big at all and flat. And for that, a continuous glucose monitor is just, it's a wonderful tool. Your program sounds amazing. That sounds really reasonable and thoughtful. And I know you're having tons of success with it. And so thank you for sharing that. This has been an awesome conversation, Dana. We've gone through a lot of these numbers. This is, like we said, for me, and I think for you as well, these are expected results. If you have been in this world long enough, we probably could have predicted that most of these things would have happened, but to actually see the data, see how you did, see how you felt, rate all those things, I think is a wonderful resource. And yeah, I just so much appreciate the work that you're doing. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Right now, they can go to insighthealth.zone, which you mentioned. Thank you. And I am working on a club model concept. And so it would be a group that would also have a CGM and be working with it. So to be able to take it out to the masses a little bit more. But the big thing is I want to move into an area where people have a supportive community, and then having a platform that would be able to encourage that and it would be as well offline, and then would have our virtual weekly meetings as well. So I'm just starting to dig into that. But yeah, insidehealth.zone. And then there's a discovery call, a 20-minute. I think right now I charge $10 for it because, everybody's just scheduling things, but for your listeners, so it's a way of qualifying. If they have to put a credit card in for $10, I know they're probably going to make the appointment just because they took the time. But and I'm not selling. I'm teaching. I share people with the implications, and then they can decide whether it's a good fit. Um, and for your listeners, though, if they go in there and do free pass, all caps, they could schedule it, and they don't have to do the $10.
Wow, that's amazing. I actually don't think the $10 is a bad idea. We get no-showed all the time from people that don't put any money in, but we will add that to the notes. We will add your website to the show notes as well. It's a beautifully done website. You did a really good job with that. Dana Hemmingsen, again, thank you so very much for all of your work. I'm so glad you found the carnivore diet and had the time to come on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Vice versa, Casey, still doing what you do, and I just so love how you engage clients and how you facilitate the question answering and bring out the best. So thank you for the opportunity, and to you too as well. I think sharing this information and keep sharing it, and and even if it's repetitive for a lot of people, I think it's essential right now.
Yeah, we need those repetitions though, right? Like the first time you heard of carnivore,
Absolutely.
like you could have said like, "Oh, this
Yeah.
sounds great. I'll go out and do this." Well, no, I
Right.
appreciate the kind words, but honestly, it's our guests like you that make it really easy. And you know what it's like. You start to do this, and you really just get so lit up by it. You want to learn about it, and then you want to share about it. So that's what you're doing. You're doing a great job. So again, thank you so very much for coming on our show today.
All right, Casey. Take care. We'll meet up someday. I need to get out to some events. I haven't done that, so I need to start doing that.
They're pretty fun, and I would just watch out. Maybe one Friday, I might just show up at your house for Friday night steaks.
Oh, absolutely. Because you know
That
why?
sounds really good.
I want to see how you sport that hat in person. Because you sport that you wear that hat really, really well. Kudos to
Thanks,
the
dude.
hat, man.
Thanks. Just like this. It's fine. Well, thank you again very much. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.